Poco F3. A weird decision. Let's talk about it. Okay, this is Ahmed Bouariki, but you can call me Slorks, and if you're not familiar with the naming scheme of Poco, the F series are supposed to be the best phones that they give you. This is when they decided that they're going to give you a couple of phones a year. It was much easier with the Poco F1, right? Just the one, and it's the best one that they can give you, but they started expanding that portfolio, and now we get X and the M series and all the stuff from the Poco series. But still, F is supposed to be the highest, if not the flagship, let's say, for Poco. And the Poco F3, weirdly enough, does not have the high-end flagship processor. That's right, this phone is going to be packing a Snapdragon 870, which is built around the 7nm architecture, and to be honest, it gave me a good performance, but just knowing that it's not the Snapdragon 888 makes me think the phone could have been a lot better if it had that processor. And it made me think, why did Poco this time around did not go with the highest end processor on their highest end model? And the only thing I can think about is that the Snapdragon 888 is actually more expensive this year, that they decided they wanted to keep the price point lower, so they went with the Snapdragon 870. Which means this phone can go up to $400 for the 8GB variant. I have the 6GB and it performed pretty well. I don't have any problems with how it was performing. Let's go to the about page real quick, and as you can see, here we go, all specs. I got the 6GB version and it works pretty well. I don't have any problems in terms of multitasking or anything like that. As you can see, the phone is fluid, the animation is really nice, and that's due to, of course, the infamous 120 Hz refresh rate that is actually going to be available on this phone, with also OLED display. So you get the cool stuff like the always on display. And with MUI 12, you're also going to get those super wallpapers that work very, very nicely. And yeah, all the bells and whistles that you got used to from Xiaomi phones this year. So performance still works great. It's just in my head, right? Thinking that, oh, 888 is going to be better, which is. But I think they wanted to keep the price down, as I mentioned, so they went with a Snapdragon 870, which still performs fine. What also performs fine is the triple camera setup on the back. And I'm glad they went with the triple camera instead of going with 4 cameras, charging us even more for another useless camera. But they went with a triple camera system, and it works pretty well. You have a main 48 megapixel sensor that gives you a ton of detail and really good dynamic range. You got an 8 megapixel ultra-wide sensor that is lacking in terms of pixel density. It could have been better. When you look at the picture, it looks pretty. In terms of dynamic range and color, and of course saturation, very natural colors. But in terms of pixel density, it's not that great. Given the lower count of pixels that you have, this is another ultra-wide 8 megapixel shot. Switching to the 48 megapixel here, you get a lot more detail and good dynamic range with plenty of saturation and colors. This is a 2x shot from the 48 megapixel. Unfortunately, there is no dedicated telephoto lens. They went with a 5 megapixel macro, which I will discuss later. But this is another shot from the side with a 48 megapixel, getting a lot of details. This is an ultra-wide shot with the 8 megapixel, again, lacking in terms of pixel count. Other than that, it does perform really well. This is a shot that I tried to punch in with the macro mode, but it didn't convert to it for some reason. So this is a 48 megapixel shot, and the bokeh is natural because you're moving into the subject and the sensor is pretty big. And this is another shot with full resolution for the 48 megapixel. This is why you see a jump in terms of dimensions. This is another shot, and you can see a lot more details. The photo is a lot more sharp because you're utilizing the 48 megapixel in whole instead of the pixel binding with a normal shot before. This is another shot with the 48 megapixel. As you can see, there's a ton of details like the hairs on my hand and the watch strap, and of course the natural bokeh that comes with those shots. This is of the Ninebot. I just wanted to show the texture that you get on top of the scooter. It's really phenomenal of how much detail you can get from the 48 megapixel when you go all the way. This is a punched in shot with the 48 megapixel sensor, again with 2x. You still get plenty of details if you keep in mind that you're going to have around 24 megapixels in terms of pixel count or pixel density, so it works pretty well. And what does not work pretty well is the night mode, to be honest. The shots become a little bit softer. They get a lot of noise, you miss a lot of the details, they just black out, and you tell the camera's lacking, especially if you convert to the ultra wide. Come on, in 2021 a phone should not have this bad of photos, especially with a night shot. This is a shot that I took with the pro mode, so I can get as a natural look as I could, and still the noise is pretty high. But if you do utilize it with a little bit of light, you can get some decent shots with night mode that gives you enough colors but not enough details. A little bit of noise here and there where the highlights are supposed to be, But I wouldn't say this is a good night shot shooter, especially if you're going to be shooting things with a lot more details in the night. And please don't use the 8 megapixel ultra wide, not even in night mode, because it's horrible. Now, in terms of the selfie camera, it's a 20 megapixel and it gives you a ton of details, as you can see. And it bokehs out the space behind you and blurs it out very naturally. Of course, it does it via the AI. It's a f2.5, unfortunately. I was hoping for a bigger aperture, but it works. It still lacks like the other phones in terms of blown out and overexposure of the background, especially if you go for the portrait mode. So if you lean in a different way, you can get a better look at the photo because you have less of an exposed background, and you can definitely see where the bokeh-licious effect works. Keep in mind, fellas, that you can get a photo like this today on a $400 phone, which is just impressive. And shot after shot, I was really happy with the way it was performing. As soon as I turned off portrait mode, I started getting dynamic range in the photo, but of course I mixed out on the bokeh, which makes portrait mode looks a lot better. So I'm happy with the cameras. Now, I don't mind them at all. Night mode is not the greatest, but then again, this is not the main focus of this phone. Poco is not in the space to compete for the best camera phone. They're in the space to give you the best performance ratio in comparison to how much you're going to pay for the phone. So it's supposed to be a value-oriented phone. And it does give you a lot of value. First of all, the charger is in the box. It's at 33 watts, so it charges pretty quick. The battery is a 4520 milliamp battery, and it performs pretty well, between 5.5 hours and 6 hours of screen on time on heavy usage. I don't mind it at all. And you're gonna get in the box a case, a TPU case, no problems, with a lip so you can close the end of it because it's only IP53 certified. And this is where I think Poco started taking shortcuts. Well, obviously, right? For them to keep the price point down and attractive for everybody, there's going to be shortcuts. And IP53 for the price range of $400, I was hoping for IP67. That means that it's going to be water resistant, but submersion, forget about it. You can't do that with this phone. And another thing, we do have a AAA camera setup, but they cheaped out with a 5 megapixel macro instead of putting a dedicated telephoto lens. So you get actual 3 different perspectives instead of just a 5 megapixel macro. Now, another thing that I didn't like, but it is a premium feel at the end of the day, is the reflective glass on the back. As you can see, it's a mess. It gets smudgy and dirty really quickly, and I got used to using matte finish phones over the last couple of months, so this was not a happy thought for me, or remembering how bad those reflective mirroring backs or finishes can be. And yeah, I was hoping for a different industrial look. Finally, it doesn't support wireless charging. You know, it's give or take with the $500 price point, but Poco did bear in mind the stereo speakers effect, and it works pretty well. We have actual stereo speakers blasting from the top, and of course your dedicated speaker on the bottom, which sound very, very well, along with, of course, consuming media on the 6.67 inch supporting HDR display. The experience for media consumption is really good on this phone. So if I'm being really picky, that Snapdragon 870 is just in my head. Of course, the AAA is going to work pretty well, but if you just don't think about that, which is your average consumer is not going to be thinking about, the phone is going to give you a solid performance alongside phones that are going to be costing a lot more than this. And it's due to the optimization that they did with the software, MUI 12, of course, with the Poco F3. So if you are budget oriented and you wanted something that performs really well on a $400 price point, I can recommend this phone in terms of performance and camera performance together, but do opt for the 8GB version just so you can be future proof. I think 6GB is ridiculous in this time and day. Although I use the phone in 6GB, but I don't know how it will be long term in terms of future updates and all that. So opt for the 8GB. It's $400. This is going to be cheaper than $400. And yeah, if you do want to get the phone, you can use the link at the bottom of this video. And I guess that's it. Thank you again for watching the video all the way to the end. And if you do like this content, please consider subscribing and enabling the notification bell so you'll be up to date with the next video. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. And as always, take it easy.